Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the Upside Down. I'm your host, Vecna.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. Justin, Vecna, good to see you, my friend. How you doing this week?
Doing okay. It's been a long one since I've been away from you, sir. Hopefully your time in Dollywood was good. I'm looking forward to hearing from that. But how are you, man? Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to the episode. We've got lots of good stuff. We've got some F1 with the British Grand Prix, a lot to talk about there. Of course, League of Legends, some of the matches we picked up in the LPL, LCK, and LCS. And then we have our Magic the Gathering right there at the end before we get to the flavor of the week. But I can go ahead and lead us into the episode with the Rose, Thorn, and Seed for this week.
I'd love to hear it, sir. Go for it.
Awesome. So my Rose was my trip this past weekend down visiting family in Tennessee. It was nice. I hadn't seen my grandparents and my aunts and uncles who were there and cousins in quite some time, probably about 3 years, because everyone lives just a little all over. So that was really nice. Spent some good time. It was definitely a fun but interesting trip. We were, of course, seeing family, got to go to Dollywood, as you alluded to, but it was also just very, like, the towns were just a little different than what I'm used to, I guess. Gatlinburg is like a Disney theme park. It's just Ripley's Believe It or Not, like aquarium and laser tag and maze room and all these things. And then you're in Tennessee and I'm like, oh, there's going to be good restaurants, some nice like hometown mom and pop kind of spots. And then it's like Johnny Rockets Burgers and Five Guys Burgers and Fries and all these just generic chain restaurants. I was a little like disappointed. I saw a couple Trump stores, which, whatever you want to think about it, I just found it weird that a former president has his own merch store just out there. So either way, I find that kind of odd. And then we were at a fireworks show on the 4th of July. And on the 4th of July, I didn't expect to see Confederate flags at all. I was wrong. Should have known that the day that's supposed to be about America and being a country as a whole would have some rebel flags. So it was an interesting spot, but a fun trip.
Well, I'm glad you had fun. Yeah, they can be a cantankerous bunch, that's for sure. Glad you had a good time. Now I'm curious, was that just the area that you were in that you saw so many like chain restaurants, or was there like, were you just in like a different part of town, I guess?
Well, so like, I guess on the outskirts and just random roads and whatnot, you'll find like good barbecue places or things like that. But
Right.
in the downtown city of Gatlinburg, it was just all like those kinds of spots and
Like places that are here.
yeah, and like
Right.
I expected it to be this like southern town with like its own. It's an old town. It's got a lot of history. I was expecting these like unique like Smoky Mountain, I don't know, foods like barbecue and different things like that are unique to the area, not necessarily. Or like the style of the area, not that like barbecue is unique to specifically Tennessee, but their own style of things. And it was just all chains and stuff, lots of like airbrush T-shirt and keychain shops and things like that. And I'm like, why is this like? It was like a tourist town without the actual
Boardwalk?
thing to. Well, it was like a giant boardwalk, but it was like a tourist town without having really a thing to draw people there other than it was like beach towns. You've got the beach. People are coming there for the beach. So of course you're going to have all these like gift shops and like mini golf and all these things. This is just like a little town in the middle of the Smoky Mountains, and they're like mini golf places everywhere, escape rooms, Ripley's Believe It or Not, like all these things. And I'm not sure, other than Dollywood, what the like specific draw to that town is, but for whatever reason it's this big tourist town that is just like crazy. According to the people I talked to, it was like not even particularly more busy than usual, being the 4th. They were like, nah, it's just always like this. I'm like,
Interesting.
yeah.
How far away is Dollywood? I'm curious if that grew up out of the like comers to Dollywood needed like a place to stay in between the, opening and closing hours.
So it's about 15 minutes away, but there's a closer town that is like right by Dollywood, basically,
Okay.
that has like some hotels and resorts and things like that. But
Gotcha.
yeah, I just it was interesting. I was expecting to go there and get like a dose of Gatlinburg, and I feel like I got a dose of any other generic like touristy place.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, yeah, that's unfortunate that you weren't able to experience any of the flavor that it could offer that was like unique about the area.
yeah, I mean, we still, like I said, we still enjoyed the trip, but it was, it kind of caught me off guard. I like had this thought in my mind of what I expected it to be, and it just was like almost the exact opposite of what I had kind of imagined. I feel like, to some extent, like Nashville almost was more, or well, Nashville was less touristy in my opinion than like Gatlinburg was. I mean, there, yeah, you have all the bar scenes and everything, and the main like strip of spots, but there's all sorts of historical little places and museums and shops and mom and pop kind of bars and restaurants, and it had its own like feel, which I didn't find, but nonetheless, that was quite a long rose. For my thorn this week, with being down in Tennessee with my family, some I found out some things about some people in the family that I was not super impressed by, and it kind of gave me a lot of contemplation. And I don't want to say too much because things are still kind of ongoing, but I'm just like, it was kind of a bummer on the trip to have some stuff come, some new information come to me, that kind of made me rethink my opinions on some people. And it's when it's family and everything, that's never like very exciting. I kind of had a certain image in my mind about things with that as well, just kind of like Gatlinburg. I had an image coming into the trip, and that kind of changed by the end of it, so not the
Sure.
most fun.
It's always tough when you find out that a family member is a member of the Insane Clown Posse.
I
Man,
know,
that's a tough one to take.
I know, I don't even like to say the word juggalo.
Right.
It's just
Come on, come on, come on now.
but yeah, it's just it's ongoing family stuff that I know I'm gonna have to deal with for a bit as well, and so that's just not something I'm looking forward to, because I know that things are just gonna kind of continue to stem from this. So
Mm-hmm.
so yeah,
I hear that.
that is my thorn. But my seed is that my upcoming couple of weeks, Colleen and I have a couple things here and there that we have to do, but for the most part, it's going to be much more relaxed for the rest of July. So I need a little break from all the running around and just busyness. So this will be a nice little stretch of being able to kind of chill and relax a little bit. So
Very cool. A little break on the horizon. That's a pretty cool seed to look forward to there, sir.
yeah, so that is my rose, thorn, and seed. But let's hear about your week. Extra day in there for more excitement, of course.
Oh, you know, us just gobbling up the holidays. We really, really put them to use. Me and Sarah played some Magic. We played some Don't Starve on July 4th, which is my rose. They continue to impress me at, well, the game Don't Starve, and then the developers, Clay, I should say, continue to impress me with the amount of content that they give out to their players for no added charge, as long as you're patient as a player. Every couple of months, every little bit, you always see new content. They have like Twitch integration and all sorts of fun stuff. So it's just a fun game to go back to all the time, and it's refreshing that it doesn't demand anything of you when you do go back and want to try out all the new stuff. So yeah, the game's really fun in that way. So me and Sarah were playing some of that on July 4th. My thorn here for the week is just generic wishful thinking. The flower variety at the dispensary that I go to is ever changing, and I'm taking like just basic notes on how some strains are, the smells, the taste, how they feel. Was it nice? Was it more than nice? Um, and I found a couple that I would have really loved to go back to. However, I haven't seen them back in stock, maybe out of rotation. So
They were just
the
popular because
right,
you liked them, and other people must have as well.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure. So the gem of variety has a little bit of a thorn associated, where sometimes I can't go back to the good quality strains, although it is really fun shopping at them. And then my seed here for the week, me and Sarah over the holiday weekend have been doing some talking and some chatting and some learning and some soul diving. And, you know, we just come out better for it, and we learn, and we now know how to approach situations moving forward. So I think a lot of like just good steps forward there. So yeah, good seed here for the week, but very much looking forward to talking about the F1 race. It was quite exciting. Let's get into it.
Yeah, well, to start off, obviously big blowout on lap one. We saw George Russell kind of get squeezed between a couple of different cars and end up knocking into Zhou Guanyu, flipping him up onto the halo, sliding through the gravel, flipping over the tire barricade, and up against the safety fence, to be kind of stuck there hanging upside down. Alex Albon got taken in that mix as well. Man, I am just... I hate seeing stuff like that. I'm amazed by the technology that that has come along in F1 to be able to see something that bad end up with minor injuries. I mean, if that kind of thing had happened to an F1 car 20 years ago, the driver's probably not going to be around anymore. And so probably less time than that ago, that a similar situation could happen and really end up even worse than it did.
Well, it would have been before the Halo era, right? Before they installed that, that would have been
Yeah, and I
brutal.
mean, I just don't remember how far back. I know it was probably like 20. I would imagine like 2012, 2013 that the Halo was
Okay.
introduced, somewhere in that ballpark. So really, really a short time ago that things would have ended up a lot worse. So really glad that Zhou Guanyu ended up being okay. Really happy that Alex Albon ended up okay as well. He took a really nasty shunt into the pit wall, or the wall in the pit straight, and so he had some checks afterwards at the hospital as well. So he and Joe, I think, are going to be all good. Hopefully, coming into the Austrian Grand Prix this coming weekend. The other craziness on lap one was the protesters that ran out onto the track and decided to sit down in a spot where typically cars would be coming at 200 miles an hour, and that is just terrifying. I mean, it's almost in a way a blessing that there was the accident on lap one, because by the time the marshals and everything would have been on the track, there would have been cars coming very, very fast with little time to react to the people on the track and everything.
Yeah, depending on where the bunch was, the radio messages may not have come through quickly enough before there were people on track and cars on track, and yeah, wouldn't have been good. So yeah, kind of serendipitous that it did happen the way that it did. So the protesters were not injured in the spirit of just trying to have their opinion heard. Questionable way to go about it, in my opinion, but obviously, people feel strongly about issues, and sometimes it's tough to feel heard. That probably not a good way to be heard, because obviously we're all just referring to them as the, you know, people who have a death wish sitting in front of cars.
Yeah,
It's a
I
little more
don't.
fast paced than the bulldozer like coming at a tree.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even know, after all this time and everything, all I've seen is stuff about these protesters kind of being called like ridiculous and dangerous, and I don't even know what their cause that they were protesting F1 for was. Which it like I just assume that it has something to do with like the like damage to the environment that F1 between traveling to races and things like that. But if that's the case, I think the best way to try and combat that in F1 is to try and connect with Seb Vettel, and I mean, he's been extremely outspoken about the like ecological issues and everything, or from seas rising from global warming to just about anything you can think of. So hopefully future protesters take a different course of action.
Yeah, because it does like take away from their message. Like they could easily have a good point on their hands, but nobody's gonna hear it if they go about it in that way. So yeah, I tend to agree. But yeah, the crash was horrifying. Obviously, I was up, kind of pacing around, hoping they would say or show images of him being okay. And there was very little in that, because I don't think the commentators had a lot of information. So when the talking points are not about it, and the like camera shots are not showing anything involved, you begin to believe as a viewer that things are pretty grim.
Yeah.
So it was nice that they kept us in the loop as much as they could, because that was fucking scary.
Yeah, well, and it's the second time in that day that you see the Halo saving lives. In the F2 Premier race earlier in the day, there was a collision with two of the cars. One of the cars pushed one of the Red Bull Junior drivers into the grass infield, hit him pretty hard. Looked like his steering was kind of locked to some extent, and he hit the sausage curb and flew up on top of ended up landing on top of the car that had initially hit him and knocked him into the grass and everything.
Okay.
Right on top of the Halo. It was ironic rewatching that. The commentator for the F2 race and everything is like, oh wow, I haven't seen a crash that bad in ages. Like that's probably that was a life saved by the Halo. That's probably the worst like crash that we'll see for a long time kind of thing. And then along comes the F1 race, just
Mm-hmm.
marching in there to steal the thunder and follow that caster curse. So
Yeah, big time caster curse. Holy hell.
yeah, so
Mm.
definitely some scary moments, but really awesome that the safety measures that F1's put in place has uh, been successful, and I think like along with that, with these unfortunate situations and accidents and everything, it does give these engineers additional data on ways to continuously improve these
Mm-hmm.
safety measures to say, okay, this worked, but what could make it work better? And so that's a pretty cool thing that hopefully will continue to see improvements to these different components. Even if we don't see them, that the drivers and the teams will see them to the point that they're able to continue to just make these cars safer and protect the drivers. So definitely some good coming out of some bad situations in the race. Now looking at the first start of the race, what were your thoughts seeing after the start that Max had? He gets up into P1. Lewis shoots up the grid and everything. A number of drivers make it up pretty well and everything, and then they go to the restart and go back to the starting grid. I understand why they said they did it, but
Mm-hmm.
what are your thoughts, I guess, on that decision and kind of saying, hey, we've not everyone passed to the end of X point, so we're gonna go back to the way we started.
My initial reaction was just like a little confused. It didn't really make sense. I didn't easily remember a time where that had happened when like something goes wrong on lap one. But like overall, yeah, once they explained um like sector sensors that track like where the cars are, yeah, sure, fair enough. Like if they need that as some kind of like official race start qualification where it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Unfortunate though, because obviously things went differently in the restart, and fair enough, take advantage of the thing that you're given. But yeah, just in the case that I couldn't remember a time where I'd seen it before, it just seemed a little questionable. But I think very shortly I was just like, yeah, whatever, okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of I was just surprised and confused as well, and I think the fact that the broadcast was confused also was part of like my frustration with it a little bit because
Yeah.
I'm like these broadcasters, and I mean, in today's day and age, yes, I understand. Like they have the sector like trackers and the points that see the cars go through and everything. But in today's day and age, every single inch of that track has 5 cameras on it to see it. It's so easy to be able to tell what the actual order of cars was after that point. So I just find that not that they made the right decision based on the rules and everything. It's just a weird rule in my mind to have in an age where like you can easily tell like where and what order all the cars were in when the red flag came out. So just a little funky. But I think that obviously they applied the rules the way they are, and so there's no complaints on my end. But it was confusing initially, and I think if the FIA is making decisions like that, I would like generally just appreciate them communicating at least to the broadcast, so that they can break down like what's going on and everything. I know there's not a direct line of communication and whatnot, but I think it builds better fan knowledge and things like that for the broadcast to be like, okay, red flag. They announce what order everything's going in and everything, that they're going back to the starting grid, and to be like, okay, so they say this is why we're going back to the starting grid positions as opposed to how the start went. That's because the last 3 drivers in the pack hadn't passed the section 1 or sector 1 line before the red flag came out. So that is the official last official order for all the cars on the grid. Boom, done. But to like have even like Crofty and Martin Brundle confused up there, I was like that's just a little weird.
Right. So like from a viewer trust perspective, like when these one-off things come up, it's just kind of like, oh, well, okay. And especially when, like you mentioned, Brundle and Crofty, like how many Formula One races have they watched? And like if they're confused by that up until they get the report or whatever, then it's like, then it even seems more questionable. So maybe there's like a competitive integrity thing that's happening where you're like, well, this doesn't feel right. But yeah, overall, I think it just ends up being, in my opinion of the race, just one of the many one-up mushrooms that Carlos Sainz was handed on his way to a very assisted maiden victory. Like, yep. I have trouble being as elated as the rest of the paddock or whatever with the victory, because it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think I had a similar reaction. One, and just I'll straight up say it, I was kind of rooting against Carlos to win the race, and not because I dislike Carlos, not because I didn't want him to get his first F1 win, but because I'm a Red Bull fan. I wanted Checo to catch him and get past him and get the victory and everything. But
well, not even that far down. Like, I was salty for Lewis primarily because his start was insane.
Oh,
and
I'm
just like,
I'm thinking about like at the end, but yeah, 100%. Like Carlos got the get out of jail free card right at the start there with the restart and everything, switching tire compounds, like doing a whole different strategy and everything, kind of forcing all of the teams to kind of go towards the same general starting strategy than their initial thoughts, which just that's kind of a bummer, because I was really excited at the beginning, like before the first start. They were talking about, oh, like this is one of the first like starts that we've had that really have people on all 3 tire compounds, that people are trying all these different strategies. And so it was, Carlos got he got the benefit of that at that point, kind of luck of the draw and good fortune for him. And things were being forced to add up in his favor, more on his own team's side as well throughout the race. And we'll definitely get into that more. But that does kind of get us through that initial start phase. But we also just, with that initial start, we see a number of cars ending up out after the Zhou Guanyu crash. We see Albon, Zhou Guanyu, and then George Russell as well out. What were your thoughts with going with that? Because I was like, his car was messed up after those hits. I don't know if he could have dragged his car around to the starting line. Him being a little like cheeky on the broadcast interview where he's like, "Oh, I told them to leave my car. I was gonna get it back to the pits. So I came back and it's on a flatbed." And it's like, well, one of your wheels was like completely off the car, so it's probably the right decision.
It, from George's perspective, like strategy wise, really heads up to like start fighting the decision like immediately. And it's like the, Alonso taps. I'm just making something up. Like
Yeah.
Alonso taps Vettel, and Alonso's on the radio like that guy hit me, like that was my corner. Like they just immediately start fighting for their side and for their advantage.
Yeah.
So good on him, because if he fought hard enough, he would have been back in the race. Regardless of what the rules might have been, they could have weighed on his side of like, well, you did, start running.
Yeah.
Either way, I would just like to say, as he was just trotting across the gravel and like onto the track, I was having flashbacks to Nightmares, because he looked like Nightmares feel, where you're like running in molasses, like it feels like you cannot get any momentum.
Yeah.
That's how he looked running across the track. Is like the harder he tried to move, the slower he was going.
Dude,
Which was hilarious.
I can't even imagine trying to run on that gravel that the tires get stuck on so easily in like little racing booties. Like,
well, that's what I'm getting at. It looked super difficult to get across there.
But I do also, I just have to give props to George in terms of like his sportsmanship. He saw something bad happen and he hopped out and tried to see what he could do to help. And I have to give him big props. I'm very happy with the FIA direction and everything in most cases this year, because I feel like they are really trying to follow the rule book and everything after the stuff that happened last year that people disagreed with, and the rulings that people were like, this isn't right, you're not applying the rules properly. Seeing them be sticklers about everything, I think is good, because it doesn't leave room for too much margin of error. So unfortunately, George's streak breaks for his top 5 finishes on the season, but it's a DNF, so he still could, I guess, for races that he gets to the finish line, he could still keep that streak going. But yeah, props to him. Bummer for Mercedes for sure. But looking at the potential margin for error, we have Charles Leclerc getting a little bumpy out there on the first lap back after the restart, after the red flag, going into Checo, hitting him pretty significantly, and the FIA determined that there was no investigation needed, no penalties doled out. It's kind of tough when there's that much contact to imagine that no one gets anything. I would say that was just about as much contact as Yuki and Pierre had later on in the race that got Yuki a 5-second time penalty. I thought that was because Leclerc, I think, bumped him twice in that first little bit there, took out his wing and dropped Checo from being up there in P4 all the way down to last place P17 very, very quickly. So,
yeah, and it was, so I had heard, I think this was on the broadcast, they said a little bit of rubbing is racing, and that really made me laugh, because it does offer a more lighthearted take on that very critical, like, oh, these cars touched, that's got to be, do something about that. I think there is only so much space on the track. Part of what we are watching is racers hunting for position, and I think some contact is to be expected, especially in a restart scenario such as that, in a front of the grid where it seemed like a bunch of different vehicles were competitive. You're not just going to have this free space just like on virtue of a quick start. So it is an element of tighter competition. So in the event that nothing catastrophic happened for Sergio, while it is an important piece of aerodynamic bits and baubles, it's a small little panel in the sense of the whole car. It's not like it was Fernando's like whole side panel just like bursting off. So in to a certain degree, to a certain degree, I agree with the a little rubbing is racing, because eventually you just have drivers conceding position just to tire taps, and then they're not racing at all. Then the conversation is like, well, what the fuck, Charles? Like, he's not even that good. Like, he just gives up position all the time. Like, he'll let people outbreak him all the time. Like, that would be then the conversation, not like, oh, I'm happy they're not touching tires.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think at the beginning of a race, especially, it. I don't think there's that conversation necessarily if it's like just people conceding like a little bit of room and things like that right off the start of the race, because it's a 50, well, normally 52 lap race after the first lap and everything, and the restart. I expect drivers to concede places instead of hitting each other and potentially taking themselves or jeopardizing their own race. It's not even about necessarily, in my opinion, hitting other drivers and potentially getting penalties either. Like, drivers should not be forcing themselves in a position where they are potentially hurting their own race. I mean, Leclerc, like, 52 laps is a long time to be like, oh, lap one, I've got to send it right now when you're in the Ferrari. It's one of the fastest cars on the grid and everything. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it did, in my opinion, really negatively affect Charles's race. He takes the damage on his wing, similar to how Checo does. He ends up being in a position where he's stuck behind his teammate and can't get past him for lap after lap, and the team's not letting him go past because he's not quicker by enough than what Carlos is doing. They're saying, hey, you're basically driving the same. You're like right on him, but you're also getting the toe. Like, if he's hitting X lap time, then like he gets to stay in front. If Charles has his full front wing instead of that whole side piece coming off, I would reason to believe that he is going to be a couple of tenths quicker per lap, to the point, or maybe at least a tenth, to the point that the team's like, hey, Carlos, like, you're hitting times, but he's flying behind you. Let him go. And Charles ends up in a better spot and potentially winning the race there. I thought it was.
So then my question to you is, aren't those consequences enough for you?
I would.
Right. Like, why do you need a 5-second penalty on top of that handed down from the FIA?
Because it did also damage someone else's race. I mean, seeing like the fact that Charles lost his end plate on his wing, you don't lose the end plate on your front wing if you are ahead of another car. if you're ahead of them, your front wing is out in front, and you are not, like, your front wing is not hitting that car. So he's either alongside or slightly behind Checo. I didn't feel like Checo did anything other than, like, I felt like in general there was enough space if Leclerc allowed it, and he just didn't. And so I think that's where it comes in, because it's like, yes, it did negatively affect Charles, but also it really messed up. Well, could have messed up Checo's race. I think karma kind of worked things out a little bit in the end, but I did feel like there could have been a little bit of like a little bit of something from the FIA, and I'm not talking about any crazy penalty or drive through pit lane or anything that's going to take a huge chunk out of his race, but I thought 5 seconds would have been a reasonable assessment. Either way, like I said, that's that kind of room for that small gray area that the FIA is allowing and working with. They've done a really good job, though, with the typical, like, these are the rules, these are not subjective, that's what we're following, end of discussion, end of story. I appreciate that, and so I'm not really too frustrated with the FIA. I just was surprised, I think, that there wasn't something dished out there.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense to me, the angle of, like, well, because it did lead to, like, destruction of another vehicle, and, like, messing with his race as well. Yeah, I see that point from your end. The other instance that gave Carlos Sainz the edge once again, and we'll get to the details, but overall, my conclusion from this race is, like, one lap pace, small qualifying pace, couple of laps after a restart, really strong. Over the course of the race, though, like, barring the Max taking the debris, I I doubt he gets the victory, so that, like, gives him the leg up. And then there's the, you know, he's being hounded by Leclerc in a way that, like, and they ended up doing it. They were going to swap those positions around eventually.
Well,
And then
they said they were, but I think that might have been a carrot kind of dangled out in front of Leclerc, like, oh, just give him some time. If he doesn't hit what we're thinking, then yeah, we'll switch him around and everything. And
wait, you don't think the overtake was a swap around? You thought that, like, you think that was a, like, clean overtake?
No. I mean, they did, but then didn't they bring Sainz pretty much right into the pit lane? If I could be mistaken. I was thinking that they basically were, like, sent Leclerc and then pitted, because I'm pretty sure that they were like, okay, Leclerc, like, you go, and then immediately pitted Sainz that same lap. And that was essentially, like, their way of being like, okay, Leclerc, like, you can go now. Carlos is coming into the pits.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because
I don't
Carlos,
know where that was in relation to the Ocon going off. Because that's what really gave Sainz, like, the advantage back, was that it bunched up the grid and he was able to just, like, ignore what his team said.
well, that was that was at the end when that's what brought out the safety car at the end. So the initial swap
Leclerc
around
was ahead from that whole time.
Well, yeah. So they had done the swap around by bringing Carlos into the pits, and then it worked out that that Leclerc ended up in front. I think after he took his pit stop a ways later, or he just was on way fresher tires, so they let him go by later on in the race. I thought you were talking about the initial, like, when Leclerc first went into the lead, but I think I might have been mixing up the two moments in the race.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah, because I guess
because
I guess
Leclerc
all I
was
was
in
trying
the
to get
lead,
to
yeah.
was like, yeah, he was out in front, and it
Well,
was the like the serendipitous Ocon going out that
yes, yeah, yeah, I
bring them
see.
back
Yeah, I
together.
was talking about different part of the race much
Mhm.
earlier on when Sainz pitted and Leclerc pitted like 8 laps later or something like that.
Sure.
But yeah, he did he benefited from that, but also man, Ferrari does not want to win this constructors championship.
Hmm. What makes you
They
say that?
their strategy has been absolute garbage because all they could have done one thing differently and had a 1-2. They pit Leclerc and double stack with Sainz on the safety car. They even said on the broadcast that they had about 10 seconds to make the decision whether or not to pit Leclerc, and they didn't pit him and left him out there on 15 lap old hard tires while Sainz, Checo, Lewis, Lando, everyone on God's green earth and their mother is coming into the pits for soft tires, and they leave Leclerc out there after having plenty of time to make this decision. Plus, you should have fully expected on Ferrari's side that Ocon, when you hear over the radio that his car is done and you see where he's at on the track, you know there's going to be a safety car. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that there's a safety car. They leave Leclerc out instead of double stack Leclerc softs, Sainz softs. They both still come out P1 and P2 because of the gap.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of Leclerc being able to be just swallowed up by Checo and Hamilton on soft tires for the last, 10 laps of the race and get just pushed around, he's on soft tires and can actually compete. And hey, maybe Sainz doesn't get his first win then.
Mm-hmm.
But Ferrari goes 1-2 instead of 1-4.
Right.
They pick up huge points on Red Bull. If they go 1-2, they pick up huge points on Red Bull because Checo then finishes, let's say Checo finishes P3 there then, so they gain points there. They would gain a couple of 3 points on Checo, but then from Sainz or Leclerc, whoever's P1, all the way down to Max, that's another 19 points that you gain. So you're gaining 22 points in the constructors, as opposed to now they gained, let's see here, 13. Those they could have gained almost 10 points more in the constructors fight by just pitting both of their guys and double stacking instead of just being like, oh no, Leclerc, hard tires are fine, Carlos, pit, box. That was a big assist from the Ferrari team and decision making to put Sainz in a position to win that race.
Yeah, and I'm curious, I hesitate to make, like, I don't know. I don't think I understand enough about the tires and the lap times and the gaps and such to really understand how it could have went, but it feels like yeah, they are a bit behind on the strategy in that sense because obviously the other teams were ready to hop on that opportunity and they were, hesitant. I'm curious if the hard tires were showing good lap times. Like, was he consistent? Was he keeping up? And not really
Well,
struggling?
I think the biggest issue with them was the amount of time it was going to take to warm them back up. And, you
Mm-hmm.
only have, I guess, 10 laps to go when that safety car comes out and everything.
Sure.
So, you're going so slow behind the safety car on hard tires. It's so difficult to warm those up. It's going to take you 2-3 laps to get them back into the zone that you want them to. And by then, the people on the soft tires are going to be gone. Like
Right.
you're not, your hard tires don't matter at that point, especially ones that are 15 laps old or so. I
Well, then
think,
that brings the question in of like, okay, so then how effective really is the double stack? Maybe they weighed it quickly in their minds of like, okay, we what if the double stack goes wrong? Like we've seen it go a bunch of
yeah.
times.
I
If the
mean,
double stack goes wrong, then they lose everything that they've gained. Maybe they were like, that's a 1-4 sounds better than like, whatever happens if they get like a 15-second pit stop because something goes wrong. They don't have a set of
yeah.
tires. Who
No, I
knows?
mean, that's a good point in and of itself, but I think um, if you're an
Either way, it was the wrong call. I agree with you.
if you're an F1 team that's trying to win and trying to compete for the title, which I mean, like I said, it seems like Ferrari's not trying to compete because they I think they missed out on a big opportunity here personally. But
Hmm.
if if you are a team that's competing for the title and for the championship, I don't think you assume that something's going to go wrong in a double stack pit situation. I think, yes, there is more likelihood of something going wrong. But if you're going out there and trying to win and trying to compete, you're trying to give both of your drivers the best opportunity. And double stacking is something that happens enough in F1 that it shouldn't be a big issue to do. And I think, like, if you trust in your team and you trust in your crew and your engineers and your pit crew and everything, then you should be assuming that they're going to do their job right and that it's going to be a smooth sailing.
Yeah, so maybe it's not like not so maybe it's not like fear based or like, oh, I'm like we're worried we're gonna get it wrong. Like, is there a sense in which they just look at it as a percentage thing? Like, the 1-4 strategy, whatever they did, they saw as this is like an 80% play. The double stack is a 30% play.
Yeah, I think that is possible.
That's how I see stuff like that. Not like, that he calls up his mom and is like, mom, like really, I don't know what to do here. My boss says this, my lady says this. I know it's not that kind of stuff, but it's
Yeah,
just like in the moment, it's got to be so hard to know the math of like
it's
what's got the highest chance of going right.
yeah, I would agree. I think that though, I just think that if you think that you have the strategy right in terms of Carlos's
Hmm.
stop, if you're like, oh yeah, like the strategy is to pit, then I think you do both your drivers. I think I'm pretty sure, and I'll look at the pit summary right now, but I'm fairly certain that um, both drivers on that were still in the race on most teams ended up going ahead and pitting right there. We saw I guess
No,
most
you're
teams
totally
didn't.
right.
I guess most teams didn't have both drivers out, but
Now, I'm not saying it was not the right play.
yeah,
I guess I'm just trying to get into the mind of the pit wall
yeah. No,
and
I
just
mean,
think like, how do these things break down?
yeah,
That's
I
all.
think I think there's definitely. I mean, all it could have also just been like, we're not sure, we're not like we're crunching the numbers, and by the time they get the feedback from their calculator, they're like, I can't bring Charles in anymore. He's past the pit entry, but Carlos is 4 seconds back, so we can still get him in. Could be
Sure.
something like that too. But I feel like in general, and I think Charles also kind of felt, at least at the end of the race, like he kind of got held back by his team in multiple different situations. He's
Mm-hmm.
not allowed to go past his teammate. He ends up not getting pitted onto the best tire strategy at the end of the race. They
Mm-hmm.
tell Carlos, hey, defend for Charles, who's going to be slower than literally the top 5 cars. And Carlos is like, nah, man, I'm not screwing myself. Even though earlier in the race, Charles is like, hey, I'm getting screwed by him holding me back. Let me go. And they're like, nah, give him one more lap. One more lap comes by. Hey, did he hit the time? No, give him one more lap. Like, I can imagine Charles, or I can understand Charles' frustration with the way things went, and especially after just getting cruised past really by Checo and Hamilton. Hamilton had plenty of time to get past him and took a couple laps to do it, but was able to just cruise on with the DRS at that point.
Yeah, well, and more than the Ferrari race, I think talking about Lewis and Sergio is or not having talked about them so much is a bit of a disservice because they
Oh no,
ran a
well,
phenomenal race.
oh yeah, no, I was definitely getting to them. I didn't want to skip too far along.
Sure.
But I just I definitely wanted to dig into the Ferrari strategy and thoughts, I guess, because it was I really do feel like they missed out on a golden opportunity. I mean, they have. We'll talk about Max as we kind of work our way down the grid, but they have Max in a position as the drivers' championship leader, as well as helping Red Bull with the constructors, and he's struggling down the grid because of the damage he took. And I think that they could have had a probably 10 point larger swing if they had made some different decisions there at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Definitely looking forward to this race being maybe a bit of a learning experience for the Ferraris, and hopefully tighten up their communication. I guess would be a good summation of maybe what happened. But
Yeah.
the race from Sergio after being knocked out by the contact with Charles was, I mean, we didn't really even get to see it until mid to late race. He was getting up into the points positions, and
Yeah.
then that's when we had the some of the you had the max low power scenarios, and that led the pack to get ahead of him. He's still on the hunt. Lewis is still there. So yeah, I think it was a great drive from Sergio that we didn't really get to see.
Yeah, I was gonna say a little disappointing with the TV direction there because I felt like there wasn't a lot of focus on like the midfield really in this race. It was so much of just watching the top 2, top 3 cars and seeing it. You're just watching Sainz and Leclerc like right on top of each other, and then just the entire time talking about Lewis and oh, he gained point 0.1 this lap, oh, he gained point 1.5 this lap, and so they're just going through and just watching the lead cars as Checo goes from P17 all the way up to restarting in P4 after the safety car towards the end, and I'm like I didn't even know he was climbing up the grid that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting there, and unfortunately for myself, I was driving down to Tennessee on my good 9-hour drive, and so Colleen has the race hooked into the speakers on my phone, sitting there, but I can't watch it because I'm driving, so I'm basically listening to the race like it's on the radio, and
Mm-hmm.
all I'm hearing is Carlos, Charles, Lewis, Carlos, Charles, Lewis, Carlos, Charles, Lewis, just again and again and again, and then like up and Lando is about 5 seconds back now. Carlos, Charles, Lewis, and I'm like, okay, I just from listening to the entire broadcast pretty intently, I had no idea that Checo had made his way up that far. They got to the restart and everything, and they're like, and Checo goes down the inside on Leclerc, and I'm like, wait, where? I'm like, how?
Yeah, where did he come
I'm like,
from?
how is he even there? I'm like, did he go from P9 up to fighting for P2 on the like safety car restart? It was a little weird with the direction, but he drove a phenomenal recovery race after that initial hit he took. There's that's one of those races that I feel like should be highlighted so well because, I mean, we speak so highly of drivers like Lewis being able to climb through the field and everything and make the moves and get to where he needs to and everything. And we've talked plenty about drivers who just get kind of stuck in the midfield and can't get past whoever, whether it's like a McLaren or an Alpine or whatnot, and they're like, you're stuck way further down than you should be. Props to him on being able to fight his way back up through.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's not highlighted, I think, enough when small gains are made in the midfield. And then, for that to be not a main focus of the race is kind of crazy. Like, I understand that the front of the table was pretty exciting as well. Although it takes away from a driver that was like really had his head down and was just, getting to work. And maybe that's not as exciting of a race, but it's definitely the performance that impresses, especially when you go that far all the way up to P2. Obviously, taking his advantages where he had them, but yeah, that was a great drive. And then in a race where Max takes damage, drops back to P7 where he finishes. That's great from Sergio that he can be relied upon to get up into the points. Where at the start of the race, he was way out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just was very impressed by him, but also super impressed by Lewis. Just working our way through the grid. Podium for Lewis. Really, really solid drive from him. He, I think, was disappointed afterwards because I think he wanted to be on the medium tires, and he vocalized that clearly after his pit stop, where he's like, "Is guys, are you sure about this? I don't know about these tires." And I think on the mediums, I think he potentially could have put himself up there into P2 or chase after the lead, but man, especially at the end, those fights in that pack of the front 5 cars and everything, he was driving so well, making really, really nice moves, not really overreaching with them though, trying to late break, send it down the inside and everything. And just earlier in the race, his lap times, he was just consistently being able to be faster than the Ferraris on the track, and just being able to gain and keep his tires going for as long as he did. It also sounds like Mercedes has fixed a lot of their porpoising issues, and so now their cars, I think over the next races, are going to be able to start being a bit more competitive. It's still clear that they're a little ways behind, maybe in terms of engine power or some of the different things than Ferrari and Red Bull, but they looked very competitive this weekend. And Lewis, that's the Lewis that I'm used to seeing after years of watching F1.
Yeah, definitely. Back to, just casually being in the hunt for podiums. And We were thinking it was coming soon, and obviously the driver is being very happy with the upgrade package that Mercedes has. It seems to be working exactly in the way that they wanted to this weekend, and I think it really shows because even Lewis, who finishes P3, but based on the pace at which he was overtaking, it seemed like he might have had a little more pace on hand as well, given just a little more time on the track to hunt down Sergio there up ahead of him. But yeah, I thought that was an incredible race from Lewis, and happy to see him back in podium fighting form.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's just good for Formula One in general.
Other random side note that just popped into my head about Carlos, but the fact that the safety car came out and he no longer had to be doing any fuel saving also saved him because he was low on fuel and would have, without the safety car, used, well, he was doing the coast and brake strategy to fuel save towards the end.
Right.
But anywho, moving along, Alonso, awesome race. I was really I enjoy seeing him right there, ready to pounce if the opportunity, if the door cracks itself an inch, he's ready to just run right through it. He had a couple of close opportunities to pick up some places there at the end, but the drivers really didn't make any mistakes. He was just right there waiting for something to happen and to jump at the opportunity. And also just a phenomenal race from him to put himself in that position. Lando as well. Great, great drive. A quiet day in the office, I feel like, for the most part for Lando, but P6 is a solid drive. So big props to him there, and that's great for McLaren to pick up those much needed points in their kind of midfield battle.
Yeah, quiet day at the office is kind of just what Lando needed, just what McLaren needs. I think that level of consistency is, going to be a bright spot for McLaren overall, with Daniel still not getting the performance out of the car that he needs. And it sounds like the tone has shifted from, you know, from winning races or even possibly being competing up at the, up with the front of the table, to just wants to bring some consistency, find a position a little ahead of where the car's performing, and just hope to slot around there week after week. So opinions changing from the McLaren camp, or not opinions, but I guess like sentiment changing from the McLaren camp. But yeah, overall great finish for Lando. In contrast with that, because yeah, having one person still up in the points is better than nothing.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, I mean, in the constructors, they only have a 6 point gap to Alpine right now, and so with Fernando finishing up just ahead of Lando, they needed to be able to get all the points they could to stay kind of ahead in that fight. So Lando putting in a great drive like that is great for McLaren and good to see. I think kind of what we're like expecting out of Lando. I think that's just the general expectation that we have at this point. We think he's a really solid driver, and I think most people do. And his consistency and way to kind of get that McLaren around the track very very smoothly and without dropping too far down is definitely a huge positive for the team. Max, we've got, I'm sure, a good bit we could say about him, but man, I can imagine that the Alpha Tauri garage had Christian Horner walking down to it with the belt in hand, just ready to go with Yuki and Pierre colliding, leaving some I don't know, like giant
Debris.
chunks of debris on the track. I mean, did you? I'm assuming. Did you see the picture of how big the piece of? Yeah, like the fact that Max had that stuck in his car, in torn up his floor, where the floor creates the majority of the downforce that these cars have in the
Hmm.
new regulations and kind of car designs. I'm impressed that he even brought the car home in the points, especially. P7 is a great drive for him in kind of the position he was put in, especially pitting so early. I think if they realized what the actual issue, or if they had been able to know what the issue was, they probably would have left him out on the medium tires longer, and his tire strategy shifts pretty significantly then,
Hmm.
as opposed to pitting so early and ending up on the hard tires and still confused about what's going on with the car. But
Yeah, that's got to be frustrating from just that side of the team in general, where the the immediate strategy does not give you the desired results, and you've already sunk that time in. It's like, oh shit, so it's something worse. And it's funny. I think we forget that if the arrow of the floor is like damaged in any way, where it like stops making the ground vacuum seal for the downforce so they can like really get the speed in the corners, like effectively you're not driving an F1 car anymore. You're driving something very similar, something still very fast, but I imagine you would have to adapt your driving style significantly, like on the fly, because you're not the car is categorically not behaving how it's supposed to because of that like main thing being disrupted in such an important way. So from that perspective, it's interesting that yeah, like they're keen to keep it going, and B, he kept it going in a way that was still inside the points and didn't just like fall all the way down the table.
well, and to highlight something you just said there, which is exactly like my thoughts on it, was you are having to drive differently than you would with a fully intact car, and like significantly differently, and that was shown, and Max was taking some weird lines into the different corners and turns. He was not taking the typical racing line because he knew he had to sweep wider around to be able to get the car to slow down enough and turn the way it's supposed to, and just the fact that he's taking these weird lines, not optimal. He still was fighting and staying ahead at the end there of some of the other drivers. Obviously, Ocon was one of his biggest competition there for a bit, who ended up going out with the gearbox issue or engine issue, whichever that ended up being. But then Mick fighting him pretty hard as well in a Haas car that looked pretty good this weekend, getting two
Hmm.
drivers in the points. Max, I was really impressed with his race. He put a good one out there, all things considered, and I think that's one of those like, hey, this is the best I could do. Like on to the next one. That was a weird situation. But talking about the Haas's, Mick, I couldn't be happier for him. I think that's a huge weekend for him, and I was excited for the young man.
Yeah, first points, very exciting. Definitely on merit as well. Just drove a really good race, got some great overtaking done. Really made something out of his Sunday, and I think it's going to be indicative of results to come. I think it's going to give him a big old confidence boost. I think it's just a really great result overall for the team. Having Kevin just not that far back from him really shows some maybe good things to come, or at least just glimmers of a team on the rise.
Well, yeah, and I mean, looking at the constructors, they're in eighth. They're ahead of Williams and Aston Martin. only 7 points back from AlphaTauri, and so I think there's, I mean, after last year coming in second to last and last place almost every race with both cars typically being lapped once, if not multiple times. This is a huge continuation of their performance from the start of this season. It's great to see. I love seeing some redemption. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be on Gunter Steiner's boat. I'm on the I'm on the Haas boat and rooting for them. It was good to see, and then Seb right there in between them, a nice race from him. He ended up with some not ideal strategy and everything with the soft tires at the start of the race, only lasting about 8 or 9 laps. Um, not the best, but he still drove a really good race, put himself in a nice spot for finishing in the points and everything, and of course Kevin, like you said, kind of scooping up that last position there.
Yeah, unfortunately for Seb, I actually think he would have had maybe a better race had he not like locked up. He got real caught up in the shuffle at the beginning, so he likely was dealing with damage from that little scuffle, and then just did what he could and got into the pits when he was able to. So I'm basically, I say that to say he may have had a little more life out of those tires had he not like locked up real hard
Oh yeah,
behind. I think it was Albon. No, who was he behind?
Latifi.
Latifi. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was behind Latifi, but yeah, I definitely agree. I think all things considered, with how the Aston Martin's performing, they're down in ninth out of 10 in the constructors, just only ahead of Williams, and so
Mhm.
any time they can get in the points, that's a nice weekend for them. So big props to Seb on that, getting those. Latifi, speaking of him, I was impressed by him this weekend. He put in some banger laps in qualifying. He drove a really nice race. Things just didn't quite work out for him during the actual race, and I just think the car is still just not quite there. But overall, a really solid weekend. I'd be curious, or I am curious how things would have gone with him and Albon both, if they were both able to be in the mix without Albon being out on lap one.
Mhm.
So I was definitely impressed by Latifi, even though he did finish out of the points. Um, Lance Stroll, sadly, also just out of the points for Aston Martin, so they missed out on potential extra point opportunity there, but their car just doesn't seem to quite have it.
No, and Lance doesn't seem like the big confidence driver that's going to like make the most out of a tough scenario. You think if Leclerc taps him, sends him into the pit lanes, like he's just 17th for the rest of the race. And
Yeah,
is that, obviously the car's got to have the pace to be able to make it there, but you just don't believe that he would be the driver that like makes that thing happen. So yeah, just totally average, nothing to write home about.
yeah. I mean, I just he's like a low floor, low or high floor, low ceiling driver. Like he doesn't typically really mess up too bad, but then he just is not gonna give you that many of those like just weird out there like crazy good performances on a weekend. Like he kind of is, what you see is what you get
Yeah.
with him. But definitely looking down to the last two finishing cars to Ricardo and Yuki. Disappointing weekend for both of them for sure. I think Danny, I just don't know what exactly he's not being able to mesh with super well with the car and everything, but he just doesn't ever really look super comfortable or like he feels confident in the car when he's out there. It's rare when he does. I'll say it that way. And then Yuki with just some tough spots, colliding with your own teammate, just not really being able to do much after that point and everything with the damage and everything that you end up with. Weekend to forget for the two of them.
Big time. Yeah. Well said. I don't know if I could add anything poignant to that.
Yeah. So that a lot to talk about with the race this past weekend, but
Yeah, it was an exciting one.
It was really exciting, even in the middle when you're not like when you're kind of watching and trying to in that little lull where you're like, okay, it's not really a pit window for anyone. Like you're just watching lap times and things like that. There was some intrigue there with Lewis gaining and different things like that. So a fun race, and the racing at the end with those top five was just like. When I rewatched it, I was just like on the edge of my seat watching
big time.
watching
Super exciting.
everyone go side by side, people trying to swap around inside outside on the different corners and everything. Really really solid race. Austria this weekend. We've got the Austrian Grand Prix. It's going to be a 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time start here for me and Justin. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Should be a fun race.
Format.
Oh, I did forget. That is, yes. So sprint
So we've
race
got
this weekend.
quali tomorrow.
So quali, sprint race on Saturday, and then the race on Sunday. So gonna be fun to watch. One other just side note that Red Bull and Porsche, I'm not really sure what the actual way to say it is, so I'll say both. But they have made a deal that they're going to be working together and everything. So looking towards future in F1, it looks like Red Bull and Porsche are going to be working together as the engine. Manufacturer, primary engine partner for the Red Bull racing team for coming years.
That's pretty exciting. I think as far as pronunciation, I think if you own one of their vehicles, I think you get to say Porsche. But if you do not own one of their vehicles,
Okay,
you
so
get to call it
Porsche. So Porsche.
Right.
It's okay. My Corolla's a Lambo, so it's fine. But looking forward to the race this weekend. Home race for Red Bull at the Red Bull Ring. Any other F1 notes that you want to touch on before? No? All right.
Nope.
So lead us into the League of Legends. Which series do you want to hit on first? What do you want to talk about with it?
Let's just get the quick game out of the way. Let's just do the CLG versus Cloud9, and then we can get into the best of threes. The CLG versus Cloud9, interesting matchup. Obviously, C9 having some struggles, but CLG top of the table, a lot of wins. I think strength of schedule is a little bit of a question there, but overall, CLG looking pretty strong at the start of this summer split.
Yeah.
Let's start at the pick and ban. Any thoughts?
Cloud9's pick and ban was not quite what I expected. I mean, they went for some really solid scaling, I think, overall, along with a strong clearing jungler with the Udyr. I don't feel like the Udyr has been a very common pick, really, but I think that they utilized it really well. Blabber was able to get some really solid clears on his jungle, look to pressure some different lanes and everything, but just really in general, scale up and be a meat shield towards the end. The Zeri Yumi, they played that very well in the bottom lane. I thought there were couple of moments that could have gone very, very badly. There was the one attempted dive bot lane, I think, after I think Blabber got killed, and so those picks worked out very well. And so instead of getting into the game, just looking at picks, the Azir, I just felt like in general the scaling and kind of the team comp worked really well for what they were looking to do. They had good like protection and healing and all with the Yumi and the Udyr. The Azir and Zeri, good damage DPS consistently in team fights, and then you have the Tryndamere who can just kind of go and split push and cause some disruption on the map for CLG to have to contest that and not be able to really ever get the 5v5 team fight that I think they would have been looking for.
Yeah, from the Cloud9 perspective, I was a little worried that they would have like very limited engage options, barring just like a Tryndamere and an Udyr running at them, or like a really nice Jensen Shurima shuffle. The Zoe, Tom Kench offer a lot in the way of, well, even the Senna has the, multi-man lockdown. So running into that team seems really hard. I was kind of curious how they were going to get that done. The Yumi looks a lot better here than it does maybe in some other team compositions. I think it's kind of found its home now more than just being like, oh, just pick it, to we want to run this specific comp. Let's get two things that are really fast and then, slap a big old movement speed steroid on them. Like that comp makes a lot more sense to me, where like a Zeri wants to be just moving forward constantly, a Tryndamere wants to be moving forward constantly. So I think in this scenario, while it may not be the best pick for Sven, from my eyes, I like the pick here just from a team comp perspective. It gave Fudge and Blabber a way in, where previously I don't think they would have had one if they went with another support. So I think the Yumi was really strong here. CLG clues into the Senna Tom Kench, which we're seeing worldwide currently. The fasting Senna is just really strong, gets a lot done. We're also seeing it paired with Seraphine. So some flavor options depending on which way you want to go. But yeah, I think the team comp from COG looked really good, except for the Yone top lane. I feel like you could have just done a more standard team fighting top lane. I think they wanted to pick for the 1 versus 1. I don't know if he thought he would have had pressure there, but it seemed like a weak side Yone, and it performed like a weak side Yone. So obviously that was a bit of a problem for COG. But otherwise, I think the draft from both sides was really strong and interesting.
Yeah, I agree because they were both definitely going for very different team comps. We did see some different top lane bans coming out as well, of course, with the Fiora, the Gangplank from CLG's side, trying to limit that top lane and kind of narrow down the champions. I honestly, though, with the Yone, I don't know what could have been really a better pick, looking at the fact that like Cloud9 kind of did counter with the Tryndamere, saving that for last pick. I mean, you have the knock up that you get from Yone as well as the Tom Kench, and so I think that was the general idea, but a last pick Tryndamere is tough to counter like that without knowing that you're going to be in that kind of 1v1 for the entirety of the match. I think the Yone was surprisingly a decent option to kind of at least hold off and not let the Tryndamere just mass push down towers. I think that maybe a Gwen or something like that would have been better in general, to be able to have a better 1v1, but without knowing what C9 was going to do. I think that's a tough position to be in, so I don't hate it, but also not super impressed. Maybe even a Gnar or something like that is better, that can kind of contend with the early game of the Tryndamere, and then
Hmm.
you just say, hey, leave the Tryndamere in the solo lane. Let's win some team fights with some huge Gnar engages or something like that. I think that might be a better option. But overall, I also like CLG's team comp. I think C9 just played it out very well. They
Sure.
with that dive in the bot lane that CLG attempted. They got the flash stun from the Viego onto Blabber to get that kill. They had Palafox coming over, and really C9 dodged out on a Zoe bubble, and that kind of just ended that dive. They very easily could have lost all three team members there. I think we would have had a very different game, but
Sure.
they didn't allow themselves to get behind. They did really well with their objective pressure and contending for those dragons, even though weren't able to with the Rift Heralds. And once they won some team fights, it was just kind of a swift end.
Yeah, and even leading up to the team fights, I think CLG did a lot right. There was really good ward control from CLG around the neutrals. Past the river line, there were a couple of deep jungle control wards that led to getting like priority on dragon a couple times, so there was a lot that they were doing right. But yeah, like you said, once the fudge and blabber show got rolling, it was pretty hard to stop.
Yeah, so I was impressed with both teams, honestly. I still like, even with CLG losing pretty significantly by the end of the game, I felt like they have a lot of pieces of the puzzle still. And that performance makes me confident that they are definitely the at least playoff team and kind of midfield team of NA that I think they've shown themselves to be so far this season. And so, even with the loss, props to them. I think that they've made some big jumps from how they've been performing previously to get to this. I think CLG as an organization had a pretty big slump when they were bought out by the Madison Square Garden Group and everything, and some of those decision makers changed, but
Mm.
they've started out very well so far, and I also am just happy to see Cloud9 continue to put some solid games together in general after their slow start and everything, with their week one not having the full roster and lineup and everything.
Yeah, and especially, there is a lot of just looking at the roster now, barring Berserker, and he'll gain clout as he goes. But yeah, just looking at C9, it's a legacy lineup. Obviously, watching a bunch of these players for a decent amount of time, so just from that angle, it feels good to watch them win. But yeah, overall, we are a Cloud9 podcast. So yeah, just rooting for the boys.
Yeah, I mean, I always enjoy watching their games. It's fun to get to talk about them. But moving along to some of the other, I'd say, more important regions. Going over to the LPL, we had the oh, that was a hard eye roll there. We had V5 and Anyone's Legend that we looked at in that matchup. I was really intrigued by some of the picks that we saw and some of the bans in this matchup. We see the Amumu being picked twice down there in the support role. We saw it get banned out in game two. So V5 getting to play that. Correct. Yeah. No. Am I mixing my things up?
It was anyone's legend
Anyone's
playing a
Legend played
Mumu.
it twice. Yes. Sorry. I like said it and instantly felt like something was wrong.
Hmm.
But anyway, anyone's legend playing the Amumu. I thought that that was kind of a pretty key pick, especially in their game one. They utilized it very, very well in their team fights, especially around the dragon. That objective was they prioritized it really well, and having Kui, I think, or QQ, get in there on the Amumu and just lock people down, flash ulting people, and just allowing the rest of the team, especially the gangplank, being able to lock everyone up and have that cannon barrage come down was just so huge in a number of those dragon fights before they even had really like started.
Yeah, and it's the trap of like, okay, you've got to come into us. Ha 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 ha, you can't get out because there's, cannon fire being rained down behind you. That's what I really liked about the Anyone's Legend team comp here in game one. It had the option with the Amumu to go forward, but mostly they had some really, really solid counter engage. The Callisto Mumu seems like a really, really disgusting combination. I kind of really enjoy it.
I'm surprised
Um,
that I haven't seen it more frequently because I like that a lot.
yeah.
I like that more than I like it with the Renata or the Tom Kench. To be honest, I was really really impressed. I know Tom Kench is super strong and it was banned out in game one, so that's probably why. But the way that it performed, I was surprised.
Yeah, for sure. And I honestly think it was even more impressive in game three. That would have been a V5 game all the way forward, except I think there were like three flash ults that the Amumu got that hit like 4 or 5 members of V5 that almost gave Anyone's Legend the game.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, just from a series perspective, I think the Amumu was huge. I'm surprised they didn't ban it out in game three. Obviously, there were still some other like series flavored picks that did get banned. That's just a question of like just too many strong things. But yeah, I was really impressed with the Amumu play. Just how that like little synergy worked between the Callisto Amumu and then also just the way he was playing it. I thought it was really heads up. Just got a lot done for his team from the support position.
Yeah, he did a lot, and I was super impressed. I will say though, in game two, PP God and Photic down in the bot lane just looked so strong against the Senna Tom Kench. So the Mumu looked great. The Senna Tom Kench a little less, but that was also just due to how good Photic and PP God looked on the Callista and the Renata in the bot lane. That was a really really solid matchup. Dream played like a maniac on the Akali. I felt like he was just everywhere and just constantly putting out good damage in the fight. So really impressive game two from V5. But in general, even though V5 came out with the match victory, I left with very good feelings about Anyone's Legend because even though they're 4-3 in the standings, that was a really solid performance that they put together, and I was impressed by how they were not shying away from fights against a team that's quote unquote better. I mean, well, not quote unquote. V5's top of the table in LPL, and they're kind of in the middle of the pack, but they didn't shy away from fights. They tried to play out their team comp and take advantage of any opportunity they could, and V5 came out on top still. But I think that kind of style of gameplay and that confidence that Anyone's Legend showed is something that can be kind of carried through to future games. I think that speaks or bodes well for them in the LPL. So even though V5 did kind of take care of business, they came out with the victory overall. I definitely was impressed by Anyone's Legend.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They are now one of two teams that have just taken a game off of them, along with RNG. So I think just from that perspective, they are on a little bit of hallowed ground where right now V5 is on a bit of a tear. But yeah, they were able to take a game off them along with, the other or one of the other top teams in the LPL, RNG. So yeah, I think a lot of good things to be said just from that perspective. I want to clue in on their jungler just for a second. In game one, they showed the pathing difference between Karsa and Zhao right in the early game. And I think it was interesting where right from the get go, and it wasn't even apparent that he had a faster clear. It was nice to see a jungler just look for the tempo advantage right from the get go. There was a lot of movement from Zhao Hao with his mid laner and his support to get assistance on roams and make sure that like he was first to a lot of objectives. You saw a really really well executed blue buff steal. I forget if that was in game one or game two, but that was, I believe, anyone's legend orchestrated. They got in, got out nice and clean. So I think there's a lot to be said for Zhao Hao getting tempo on the map, getting pressure, knowing where or intimating where the enemy jungler was going to be and putting himself on the other side of the map. I think there were a lot of scenarios where Zhao Hao and ZDZ got the drop on Rich just because of jungle positioning. Maybe Rich thought Carson was going to be there a little sooner or whatever, but it definitely seemed like Zhao Hao had good, solid tempo across the whole matchup. And against a team like Victory 5, where they are doing really well in a lot of these matches, you need a jungler that can keep up and not lose time to these players, because then you're down to Rift Herald. Shit, they've got the dragon on you. Now it's 20 minutes and they've got Baron position. So just from a jungling perspective, I thought Zhao Hao was really impressive, utilizing the Diana, the Viego, and the Viego again. He is, I think, going to be a jungler to watch when it comes to these like top of the table matchups, because he was, I think, a key to the victory and like weighs in for AL.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I think that he performed just very very well in a matchup that could easily not go in your favor against Karsa, who is one of these perennial figures in the kind of Eastern League of Legends scene, who has so much knowledge, so much just veteran skill and everything in that position, has performed well for years and years. To be a very young player like Zhao Hao, 19-year-old, he's been playing competitively for about 3 years, compared to Karsa, who's been around for, I don't know, 10, something like
Right.
that. So really, really solid performance from him, and I think he was definitely a strong point from the AL side in the matchup. But that does bring us to the LCK. We had the matchup of T1 and Dragon X. So what were kind of, I guess, who were some standout players? What were you looking at? What impressed you throughout the series?
Well, going into it, both of the teams were 4-1. I think schedule is a question, especially for the DRX side. They hadn't faced a lot of the top of the table teams, but wins are wins. 4-1 for both teams coming in. So just from that perspective, it seems like a little bit of maybe more of a mid to heavyweight bout. So just from that perspective, I think there was, a decent amount of hype coming in. We again see from the DRX side the Callista Amumu. Definitely have clued into that. They really like the engage that it offers. Pairing that with the Hecarim and Gnar from the top side, that's so much engage, so much team fight. I really like where the DRX like game plan was. Super, I think super just strong team fighting comp. But man, it was just the Lee Sin show. He did not care.
Yeah, owner. That was my biggest note for this was that owner just was a beast throughout the series. I think that he just played phenomenally in game one. I mean, we see Guma and Kyria get behind in the bot lane, go a couple kills down. We see Faker getting targeted in the mid lane a little bit, and dove under turret and everything. And Zeus and Owner really both, but I'd say primarily Owner, but Zeus as well, kept them in that game, getting Zeus the kills in the top lane to kind of stay ahead or keep pressure on one side of the map to some extent and allow the rest of the team to catch up to let the Senna Tahm Kench kind of come into its strength and strongest zone.
Hmm.
But like you said, DRX, like their team fighting comp was super strong. I think they put themselves in a really good spot for this matchup, and were able to really put up a phenomenal fight in game one. Game two was definitely a pretty heavily favored T1 game, but that first game I felt like DRX could have taken that just as easily as T1 could have, and this turns into a 3-game series.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with the pressure that Piochik was putting out like in the early game. He was just everywhere on the map. So I think there were I definitely think they had options. They had ways to start fights. So yeah, I think it was pretty close. Obviously, the T1 pedigree comes through a little bit and do some out team fighting, some out macros, and yeah, and then they were just on top. Like the Baron play was almost so good. It was almost so good.
They were just
Uh,
so low health and they
yeah,
just didn't want to leave.
yeah.
They're like, no, we've committed this far. We're all such low health. If we don't take the Baron, if we base, T1 gets a free Baron, and we don't want
Hmm.
that. They didn't cut their losses and fight another day.
And fair to him, but yeah, I think that was definitely an exciting moment. But yeah, they what do they call it? A flip. But
Yeah,
yeah, game two was less of a uh, you know stand up mano a mano less type bout. It was more of just the T1 show. The Zeus versus Kingen matchup was unfair. That was brutal.
that
The
was rough.
Fiora into Gwen, I think, is like has advantages both sides. You got to play.
Well,
You got to know where you have it. But man, Zeus just ate it up.
when you're in a kind of skill based matchup and then the other guy just is more skilled than you, that
Oh, it just goes the other way.
doesn't go super well, especially when you have a jungler like Poppy that can't necessarily provide the pressure that you're looking for early on. I mean, Poppy has some stuns and different things like that. If she can headbutt you into a wall, there's definitely tons of counterplay from the Fiora with the mobility as well as the parry that she has coming out to kind of defend against that. So Kingen was just stuck in a matchup that he was going to lose because Zeus has been playing like a demon out there. He's just looking so strong. Faker on the Swain. I thought that pick was a solid pick with the Victor coming out from Zika. He was able to just match the tempo and then just kind of be difficult to kill. And that's really kind of what you need from the Swain. You're using your ult to just kind of drain tank, and then with the Zhonya's hourglass as well to just be able to last in team fights. He did his job well. I think it's good to see that T1 has this kind of alternative strategy that they can play against a pretty solid team that is outside of their standard, where they are really focusing on that top side of the map and bottom side, and really letting Faker just kind of fend for himself, as opposed to a lot of the matchups where we see, even in scaling matchups, them trying to push Faker ahead, get him the leads, whether it's on the Corki, the Azir, those kinds of picks. They were like, nope, he just gets to be Swain, he gets to go in there, do his thing, and the other lanes are gonna push this lead heavily. So
Yeah, he just had to be just a big old health bar for them not to be able to get through. And just from a gameplay perspective, I think T1 had it like really locked down just the whole time. The one interesting thing I do want to point out from DRX in the pick and ban is I think based on what T1 was banning and picking at the start on their blue side, DRX was kind of clued in that they were going for the Senna Tom Kench again. So they picked the Kalista Renata, which is a stronger 2v2 lane than what would be the Senna Tom Kench. You get the early game ranged advantage over the ranged plus melee.
yeah.
So I think in some senses, DRX was trying to say, like, we don't want to waste a ban on Tom Kench, so we'll kind of pinch your choice. We'll pick the Kalista Renata and say, if you want an unfavorable matchup, like greeting for the Tom Kench, go for it. So heads up from DRX, but just like even more so from the T1, where they were like, all right, cool, we'll just play Fasting Senna with a Seraphine. And instead of doing like the AD tank guy, they get the AP damage, which is also heads up from a T1 that's drafting double AD with the Viego Fiora. Not a lot of burst from Swain. Where do they get their AP from? Well, they're just going to put carry on Seraphine. So I think from a pick and ban perspective, like honestly, a fascinating draft in game 2, where it felt like DRX like got T1 into check, but T1 had a way out of that position. So just in that sense, I think it was really fascinating and really gave him the leg up in the matchup, because there was not the discrepancy with one of them having a melee. So I think they were able to really fight in the 2v2, where DRX was looking for an advantage.
Yeah, and I think with that, DRX, like, looking for that advantage, T1 obviously, like, the recognition of that and the shift was, like, impressive. I mean, you don't see too many
pivot.
teams that can pivot like that and really, like, be pretty successful with it. I mean, like you said, Tom Kench was left open. They were like, hey, pick it, see what happens, and T1's like, nah, we're good, this is gonna stomp you, so we're fine. And they shifted quickly to something and looked really good on it. There are definitely times that teams do those shifts, and the support or the whatever player is shifting and kind of just picking up the counter may not be as good on it or as experienced, but Kyria looked really good on the Seraphine. His ults, especially in the team fight scenarios, were just huge. And T1 just was able to kind of run away with that game pretty heavily.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah. So that I think that does wrap up our League of Legends talk.
Hmm.
I know you got a couple of Magic games. I'm not sure how much you want to get into those before we hit the flavor of the week, but any notes on Magic for this week?
Yeah, I just want to sprinkle some stuff in, mainly just like a kind of just a little bit of a summary. So, Buddha Spoon helped me with a list that was Aloro. So it's black, white, and blue. The list that I had for the deck previously like didn't really have an identity. It was like kind of mishmash, and like it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I took it to him, and we thought about it, crafted a little bit. This Monday was the first time after the swaps and everything, and yeah, after the swaps is the first time I got to play with it. So I just kind of want to comment on how it did and kind of what stuck out. I think what was really fun was a couple of the, I'll say, pet cards that I was recommended, where it was like, oh, in a life gain deck, it's like this and this that you really want to go for. And I've seen, this card be a house. So Indulging Patrician and Evil Twin were both like recommended by name, not just, well, let's see if we can find an effect with this. It was like, hey, if you're building this deck, get these cards. So both of those cards, Indulging Patrician and Evil Twin, I saw in the game. They came up and ended up being like huge. Game one, the Evil Twin slowed down Jason's commander to the degree that he wasn't really able to play his deck because I made an Evil Twin of his commander. And that just like put him on ice. So the Evil Twin worked out. And then in game two, the Indulging Patrician triggered like 3 or 4 times, dealing, I guess it's like 32 life to like, so like 3 damage to each player 3 times, 9 times 3. So it was like 27 damage. So he was an absolute house.
Nice.
So a lot of that really worked out, where these were cards that were trying to leverage my life gain better. That was
Gotcha.
one of them. And
Nice.
then the other thing that I saw was some of the pieces of artifact ramp that I swapped in. I took out the higher CMC artifact ramp and slotted in some 2 CMC. So instead of it costing 4 mana to cast, it would only cost 2 mana to cast. And I saw a bunch of those pieces, which consistently both games got my commander out on turn 4 and then on turn 5, where previously in games with this deck, I struggled to ever even cast my commander. So just from that perspective, it just went so much better.
Nice.
So yeah, very cool. And then the whole idea, the way that I took the deck, there are 2 cards in there that say whenever you cast a multicolored spell. So there's like 44 multicolored spells. I jammed as many as I could in there. I saw one of them that like triggers when you cast multicolor spells. So that was really fun, seeing like the flavor card that you put in that's like not that great for commander, but I wanted to make it work. Saw that, made a couple soldiers. So that was really fun. My hero of Precinct 1. Love that little guy. Found a place for him in commander. And yeah, it was great. I thought the games were really fun. So that was sweet. And thank you for letting me talk about it.
No, absolutely. I enjoy hearing, especially now that you're like, any changes to your decks that you're doing are really like fine tuning and everything
Hmm.
and all. It's not just like, oh, well, I made this deck because I had all these cards and everything. Like we've talked about in other episodes. You've got kind of, these are the commanders, these are the decks that you want to have and everything, but like you can still find ways to improve those and everything here and there. So very cool. Props to Buddha for taking the time to help you out and think it through. I think that's dope that he did that. So very cool on that for him to be helping you out kind of with the think tank and all,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and cool to see the changes like immediately like be impactful in the games that you're playing. So
And not just like minimally impactful, like really, like I loved seeing them show up in my hand. It was like, whoa, this is really good. And especially when you think of the cards that would have been there before, you're like, this does nothing. That would have done nothing. This was so much better. So yeah, like big percentage upgrade. So shout out to Buddha. Thank you very much for the help. Let us get into the flavor of the week and get these people out of here.
sounds good. So I'll get us started. So all of mine revolves around the same thing, and it's Dolly Parton. So my food for the flavor of the week, I had a hot chicken sandwich in Dollywood. I had one in Gatlinburg when we first arrived, and I wasn't super impressed. The one in Dollywood at the just like theme park food stand, banging, knocked it out of the park. Really, really good. Both me, my brother, and Colleen all had one. We all were really impressed and enjoyed them. So that is my food. For my music on the way down, when I wasn't listening to F1 on my on the car speakers, Colleen was playing some Dolly Parton music, and she has a book. Like I said, she's a big Dolly fan. She has a book of Dolly Parton that has like things about her past, things about her childhood, things about different songs and all. And I was very impressed to learn that some of the songs that I have known from other artists were originally Dolly's. I had no idea that I Will Always Love You was a Dolly Parton song that she had wrote about her country duet partner. It wasn't even about her husband. It was about her, and this is knowledge from the book, but it was about her basically telling her singing partner who had given her first big break in the music world, hey, I will always love you, but I've got to go on my own way and do this solo thing. And then, of course, Whitney Houston being able to sing that and really highlight it once again, turning it into one of the most famous songs. I think there's very few people that would hear that song and be like, oh, what song is this? Like, very, very cool to kind of have some of that background along with listening to the music. So that was my music for the flavor of the week. And my visual medium is not a show or movie. It was just the honestly the nature, the natural like beauty that I got to see while I was driving down. Colleen and I camped on the one night, and we had a gorgeous I being me and not planning super far ahead, we were on our way down. I'm like, oh, I'll find a campsite, no problem. We'll camp on our on Saturday night, do a short drive Sunday to get into Tennessee and everything. And I called I didn't know how far we were going to drive and everything, so I'm like, we'll figure it out once we get going and see how far we go. And I called 7 campsites, and they're all like, nope, we're booked, it's a holiday weekend, dickhead. And I'm like, dope. And I found this one. They're like, yeah, we have one spot left. And I was like, I'll take it. And we made it down to Southwest Virginia near Blacksburg, camped out at this gorgeous little campsite there. Beautiful views over the river, awesome mountain views, and
Nice.
just being down there in the Smoky Mountains over the weekend and all was it was really pretty, and I enjoyed being down there. So that's my my visual medium and my flavor of the week.
Very cool. I am terrified of the outdoors, so I'm happy you experience it for me. That's a lot of fun. My music for the week, I want to shout out Braxit. Turn me on to Man Man. It's I don't know what the genres are these days, but it's just like lighter, more. I'm not calling it easy listening music, but it is easy listening. and just really enjoyable. He said that he was going to see a show. We were just talking about who, looked him up, and it's in my wheelhouse. So I've been dabbling a little bit with them. They have a good song. It's called Dig Deep. I think it's a more recent one, but yeah, fun band, Man. My food for the week. Sarah is continually spoiling me. She made just burgers and fries the other day, but it's like it's not just burgers and fries. Like it's like something that you would order at a restaurant, quality burger and fry, like the nice seasoning. She's got the buttered toasted roll. She really hooks it up. She's a mastermind. So that was great. And then my visual medium, not something we watch, but something that we have watched. Seinfeld. Now that we've
Ooh.
seen a decent amount of it, we've seen a couple episodes more than once. We're like a little like we're viewing, like we've seen it, we know, and now like we've got the quotes. We're joking. We're like seeing Seinfeld in everyday life, which
Dude,
then
there's
just
an
like
episode for everything.
yes. Yes, which is funny because then it like makes you bootstrap just on the show. Then you're like, oh, it's even funnier because it's like timeless now. Because that was
Yeah.
a joke from back then. If it's still true today, whoa! Just like a lot
Aged
of those
so well.
right. A lot of moments like that, and so we're just like we're Seinfeld heads now. So it's really funny.
Nice.
That is my flavor of the week.
Very cool. Love Seinfeld. I'm a big fan. We've Colleen and I and my dad have talked plenty over the past little bit about the episode with the car rental reservation.
Yes,
It's not
yes,
about you've got taking the reservation down. It's holding the reservation that
right.
you've got to work on, or whatever the exact wording is. But love Seinfeld. I'm glad you're enjoying it. That does bring us to the end of this week's podcast, though, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, as always, find us on Spotify, find us on Google Podcasts, check us out on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter at Tall and Short of One. We love the fact that you all spend the time and listen with us. And so, of course, thank you so much for taking that time. And we're always looking forward to putting out more of these week after week. So, thank you.
Yeah, new episodes every Thursday. We just look forward to doing this every week, so thank you very much for tuning in. Other than that, this has been another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out, everyone.
Later.